Several members of the local Lockyer family served in World War II, and their relatives are still honouring them today.
Here in Wim Creek in Western Australia's Pilbara region, a yearly ceremony commemorates Indigenous service people who fought for the ADF. This memorial here was established in 2006 and commemorates 5 members of the Lockyer family who served in World War II. Albert, Edgar, Arnold, Elliot and Eric Lockyer grew up on nearby Molina Station. Out of the 5 who served, only 3 would return home. We spoke to 2 relatives of the Lockyer family about why today is so important to them.
More and more family are coming because this is the time that, it is not a funeral, so even though it is a memorial, people are coming here for a good thing, to commemorate.
Every year, the Pilbara Regiment helps to coordinate the event.
We have a special connection with this community and a connection with the Lockyer family, so we remember this separately.
The ceremony has now been running for over 15 years and draws people from all across the region to pay their respects.
And today we are spending a lot of time talking about the Northern Territory, so it seems appropriate to head to Darwin, where Cameron Carr is standing by. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning, James.
The politics of crime in the Northern Territory is often a feature, particularly in election campaigns, but for some time there's been a push to increase the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14. The Territory Government, though, has split the difference and landed at 12. Tell us about that.
So a recommendation from a Royal Commission back in 2016 into the protection of children really made this recommendation, and since then the government has sort of been seen as moving at a somewhat glacial pace to implement this reform. It's taken about 7 years to do so. Many advocates have actually been calling for the age to be increased to 14. The Acting Children's Commissioner, Nicole Hucks, thinks it should be in line with United Nations and some European jurisdictions there, so to have the age even a little bit higher, but we'll see how long it lasts. The Country Liberal Party do say that if elected at the next election, they would look to be repealing these laws and reverting the age back to 10.
OK. Knife crime has been in the headlines in the Northern Territory due to a couple of crimes, including the stabbing murder of a bottle shop worker. What extra powers are police going to have, and do people living in Darwin, are they comfortable with that?
So there have been reforms to the Weapons Control Act, so that changes the fact that a machete is now considered a form of knife and that a hatchet is a controlled weapon, but it's also changed presumption of bail, which means that people using knives will now sort of have less of a chance of receiving bail when applying. Coupled with this, police now also have the ability to wand people in the street, so to use metal detectors in around 16 high-risk zones across the top end. It's hoped to deter knife crime, but there are some concerns that it could give police the ability to potentially racially profile or target certain areas over others, and essentially over-police certain parts of the community rather than others.
Finally, Cameron, the tale of the underwater car has been a Darwin legend for as long as I can remember. But finally, it's been repeated, an underwater car trip from Mandurah to Mindil Beach. How did it succeed?
So this car, it's a second-hand Land Cruiser, and a team of engineers and divers from across the country have come together and transformed it into this sub-aquatic vehicle. They've made the engine waterproof. They've had 150-kilogram tyres that can sort of pin the car to the bottom of the sea floor. It was inspired by a similar attempt back in 1983 to make the 7-kilometre stretch from Mandurah through to Mindil Beach. Now, the team were successful last week, about 30 divers taking turns sort of going from the top of the water, swimming down to the seabed and jumping into the car, driving for about 15 minutes each. It did take about 5 hours longer than expected due to the car being bogged several times. So you can only imagine the team in pitch black at the bottom of croc-infested Darwin Harbour, valiantly making their way across. But they have succeeded, they have made it. And engineers are pretty excited about what the future could be for waterproof vehicles.
Cameron, what does this tell us about Northern Territory life? Does there need to be another wave pool, more attractions to keep all the engineers with spare time on their hands entertained?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely been a topic of conversation here, you know, taking this NT ingenuity that doesn't seem to be sort of the same across Australia. You know, we're the only jurisdiction that's attempted this multiple times. So definitely that sort of can-do attitude, I think we'll definitely see a lot more innovation like that across the territory.
All right, Cameron, thanks for joining us this morning.
Elders in the Pilbara region say the research is an important part of truth-telling about the way Indigenous people were treated in the past. And a warning, this story includes images of people who've died.
The historic town of Cossack had its heyday when pearling and gold mining attracted thousands to the Pilbara in the late 19th century. The old buildings are now a tourist attraction. These nearby ruins of a leprosarium have attracted a new investigation by archaeologists.
Today we're here to look at the archaeology of the area. There is some tangible material left behind that will help to consolidate and help to share some of the stories that the elders have already told us about the place.
This photograph shows the leprosarium established in 1910. Over 2 decades, hundreds of Indigenous people with suspected diseases including leprosy were sent here by police and pastoralists.
It is the police and the pastoralists that were diagnosing the Aboriginal people as having disease, and what we know from historical records and archaeological evidence is a lot of people probably didn't have the diseases for which they were incarcerated for.
The evidence gathered here will contribute to truth-telling about what happened at this site, backing up stories of discrimination and harsh treatment.
Truth-telling is very important because you've got to hear the two sides of the stories. If somebody put something up there and to talk about the area and what happened, you know, they need to tell the other side of the story, like the dark side of the story.
The visit to this site is part of a wider ongoing investigation of leprosariums and lock hospitals across northern Australia.
You can still see the paths and foundations of this leprosarium, which was one of many across Australia, including one on Palm Island in Queensland, those located on the Channel Island and Mud Island in the Northern Territory, and Bungarun in Derby, all of which were primarily used to incarcerate Indigenous people with medical conditions.
Cameron Carr, ABC News, Cossack. On the surface, this new supermarket in the Pilbara town of Roebourne looks like any other. But the difference is all the products here have been donated.
So there's items from Coles and Woolworths that make their way to us every day, which is fruit and veg, bread, items close to their expiry. They all find their home here at Foundation Food. Those items can't be on sold, but they can still be picked up by members as they come through and do their regular grocery shop.
Based on an international model, this social supermarket provides some donated food for free and other products at affordable prices.
It's not just having access to the food, but it's that every small town has a general store, you know, and it's a hub for the community.
This predominantly Indigenous community of about 1,000 people did not have a shop for 2 years before the new supermarket opened.
What I want for lunch today, I can just gather up the ingredients and bring it all back here and just cook it and have a meal instead of having a takeaway all the time.
The supermarket also provides food deliveries to nearby Indigenous communities and is offering employment opportunities.
Now I'd like to see it growing, you know, and get more, you know, more people working, you know, encourage the young people to work as a starting point, you know.
The non-profit supermarket is now planning to expand this model to other remote communities. Cameron Carr, ABC News, Roebourne.
Well, it's time now to check in with our regions. To do that this week, we are joined by Cameron Carr, ABC reporter in Karratha in WA. Good morning to you, Cameron. Let's start off with this story about the concerns around the safety of ancient rock art near Karratha. That's as industrial projects in the area continue to get the green light there. What is the sentiment on the ground around that?
Good morning. Well, I'm standing outside the Red Earth Arts Precinct here in Karratha, but just a 20-minute drive down the road is Murujuga National Park. It's one of the largest collections of rock art in the world and the most concentrated. Now, here in Karratha in the Pilbara, we are home to several massive industrial projects. We have Woodside, we have Yarra, and we're soon to have Perdaman's urea fertiliser plant. Now, there are concerns that the close proximity of the rock art to these industrial sectors is going to lead to erosion or perhaps fading of these rocks, and especially traditional owners and locals are extremely concerned that sort of losing this connection to their past, to their history, could be quite upsetting. Now, it seems the next steps will be to analyse whether we can scientifically and independently say that the emissions from these plants is eroding or is causing this rock art to fade, and then what the next steps there will be to protect them or potentially have to move them somewhere safe.
On another story, this is a fascinating and terribly tragic story. It's been a decades-long story managing the industrial asbestos disaster that is Wittenoom, and the town is now officially empty. What is the future of that town now?
Well, it's gone from being the busiest town in the Pilbara in the 1950s, and now its fate looks to be like it will be demolished. The Lands Minister, who is sort of in charge of managing that area when it comes to the residents, has evicted 80-year-old Lorraine Thomas, who was the last resident in the area, and they've previously described anyone who visits Wittenoom as being idiotic, citing that even a single sort of shred of asbestos can be fatal. It seems the fate of the town, which was, like I said, one of the busiest in the Pilbara, will now be destroyed, all the houses knocked down to try and dissuade anyone from ever going there in the future. It sounds like it was a wonderful place to live for many decades, but it's also led to around 1,200 deaths.
Yeah, really tragic story, that one. Meanwhile, Cameron, there was a by-election in WA's largest state electorate of North West Central. Who won the seat?
So it was won by the Nationals' Merrimee Beard, and it was triggered by the resignation of also Nationals MP Vince Catania. Now, North West Central is a very interesting electorate because it's our state's largest, over 800,000 square kilometres, but it's also the least populous, with only about 20 to 30,000 people, and it's also had one of the lowest voter turnouts whilst also having the most candidates. So it was extremely interesting seeing who so few people would turn out to vote who they went for. 12 candidates ended up entering the race, the two favourites being the Liberals' Will Bastian and then the successful candidate Merrimee Beard, and everyone sort of agreed on what the main issues were, making sure there were midwifery and maternity services in town to stop people from having to drive 10 hours to give birth, things like youth crime, things like a lack of housing.
Now, a small town, Cameron, has won a tourism award in WA, and that follows, of course, 2 really challenging years, or more than 2 years now, of COVID. Drum roll, what was the town?
So this tiny town, 4,000 people, it was Exmouth. And not everyone might know the name of that town, but you've probably heard of the Ningaloo Reef. Exmouth is the service town where people go and stay and pick up their equipment and get taken out on all those boating tours onto our magnificent reef. But it's been after 2 very difficult years for tourism, because it's not the problem that there weren't enough people. As a matter of fact, there were far too many tourists for many towns in the region around Exmouth. To cope, you're looking at, populations of the town going up almost 5, 6, 7-fold. It's combining that with a lack of staff shortages from international travellers, lack of accommodation providers. It's been really tough for businesses to manage sort of scaling up and scaling down, managing all these tourists. And it's a real feather in the cap of WA tourism and Pilbara and Gascoyne tourism specifically for Exmouth to have won this award.
And shout out to anyone in Exmouth who's watching this morning. Congratulations. Thank you so much for that, Cameron. It's great to speak to you. That's Cameron Carr there in Karratha.
These Dawson's burrowing bees are coming to the end of their life cycle after laying their eggs below the ground. It's a yearly occurrence for the species, which stores its eggs in burrows. The native bees are some of the largest in Australia and are only found in the Gascoyne region.
And we came across this patch here on the road, and for the last months or so we've been following them and taking pictures and videos and learning about them.
Mr. Sheckerman says he has adopted this colony and tried to protect it from traffic.
I erected months ago that makeshift barrier, and so far it's worked. No cars are driven through it, but there are other places too. They somehow seem to like the road, and people need to be really careful.
Elders are calling on local authorities to better manage these roads to ensure the bees are safe from passing vehicles.
We need to look after our bees because there's only certain areas where they nest. Like right now, it's in an area where it's a lot of traffic here, so we need to be careful on how we drive here.
Yes, it's been a concern for a while. I've been getting the roads closed, but it's only just a sign, so people drive around them.
The bees also have special cultural significance.
Stop and have a look around, you know, see how many burrows and that, or bees and that are out. You know, if it's a big mob, then just drive around them.
In Carnarvon, Cameron Carr, ABC News.